How's it going, guys? It's illumignostic, and I just decided to pop on here and talk about what I consider to be the most important issue of our era. Um, and it's something that repeatedly comes to my attention as a plant medicine facilitator and in my flow state coaching work, flow state lifestyle coaching. Um, and it's something I noticed, 20 years ago with people that were just a little bit younger than me. Um, I would get into conversations, and this recurring theme of this sort of feeling of pointlessness and, people just generally being lost and not knowing who they are or what they're supposed to be doing or, having any kind of direction in life. And for me, in an interesting kind of way, I can relate because mostly because I've never experienced that. I've always had a drive to do what it is that I do, and I've always been able to find meaning in that. And I was always baffled, especially when I was younger, by most people who seemed to be either unwilling or uninterested in looking beyond like the basic necessities of life of working, having kids, eat, shit, sleep, die. And I found that absolutely horrifying. And I never could understand how it was possible that people would not only that they not seem to care, but I didn't understand how it was possible not to obsess over, what is the meaning of life? How did we get here? I knew that all of the religions were fake, basically. And I didn't understand how people weren't aware of that they didn't realize, for example, that well, I was born in the southern United States, and therefore I'm Baptist. There's no other reason. So obviously, it's not the true religion. It's just where I was. If I was born in India, I'd probably be Hindu or something. So I guess what I'm saying is that I can relate, even though I've never experienced it, because I always kind of felt like without my purpose to live for, I I didn't understand how people did it, um, and as I've gotten older and watched the world develop and the trajectory of the modern culture has been what it is, it's just gotten worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And interestingly, I think the answer is basically lies in the thing that gave my life a sense of purpose and meaning. I think it's those things that I was focused on intuitively. Uh-oh, this thing. I don't know why it's doing that. But at any rate, the things that I was focused on intuitively, I think, are the keys to sort of reinstating a sense of purpose. And the incredible thing about it, or one of the incredible things about it, is that the answer to our crisis of purpose is that really the only purpose of life that you're ever going to find, the only possible purpose, is the experience. That's it. The adventure, the experience, exploration, um, you know, that's all that we're here for. I'm fairly well convinced of that. And I don't think that anyone has ever come up with an alternative suggestion that holds any water. We are the sensory organs, the sentience of the universe, exploring ourselves, basically. And I think the real cause, it's not just materialism. The reason that people have gotten lost has a lot to do with the prefabricated answers that people accept. And at the end of the day, if there's no seed of truth in it, it's not going to function in the way that truth does. And even if you believe that you have an answer, if it's the wrong answer, that is still going to manifest in your cognitive patterns and in your experiential life. I was talking a little bit about this in my secret stream earlier. Hopefully I can find the words to explain this. But, you know, if anyone is familiar with Terence and Dennis McKenna's work, you remember way back towards the beginning, they wrote a tediously, densely technical book. I think it was called True Hallucinations. And they were trying to find a way to prove mathematically, basically, that the mind is holographic. And, of course, that is an echo of a lot of earlier ideas that were very influential on Terence and Dennis McKenna, mostly being the Hermetic or New Thought idea that the all is in the all, that somehow the entirety of the universe is in each and every part of it, and that universe is mental in nature, that it's a projection of mind. And so the reality is that if you have accepted a fundamentally flawed truth, right, if you have done that in order to accommodate religious beliefs, for example, and you have had to engineer your perceptual apparatus to function in such a way that you have to maintain cognitive dissonance, and you have to engage in selective perception, and you're using heuristic bias and every other instinctual mechanism that we have in our gelatinous membrane behind our forehead to circumnavigate all of the many things that you will inevitably encounter that would challenge your belief system. If you have had to engineer, an ontology, or if you're living with an ontology that forces you to engineer your perception to avoid strategically all of these things, because of the holographic nature of the mind and the way that it builds itself, and I mean, you can see this in neuroscience, at least the basis in symmetrical patterns and the way the brain works. If you have done this, those same perceptual perturbances are going to manifest in your perception of politics, culture. Every other aspect of your life is going to be informed by this fundamentally flawed ontological disposition that you have adopted. And that's why, when people say to me, it doesn't matter if something's true, if it helps you, go ahead and believe it. Aubrey Marcus said that a while back, and I thought it was up there with the worst advice I've ever heard in my life. And you guys, in order to make these changes, I'm finding, my experience is showing me that a lot of the things that we have accepted as directives that are coming from a moral high ground, and then if we follow them, we will also be on that moral high ground, are actually wrong. And it's funny because people seem to know that something is wrong, but they don't seem to be willing to believe that they're going to have to slaughter their own sacred cows in order to move forward. Everyone has their hand raised when they're asked, are you being manipulated and fooled? Or are people being manipulated and fooled? But then when you ask, are you being manipulated and fooled? Everyone's hand goes down, you know? But we're going to have to accept that some of the things that we have come to hold dear as guiding principles are actually really, really bad. And, a lot of the things that we believe are rules of society that act as social lubrication and politis are actually destroying society. And I'm not being dramatic here. It's quite literally true. I hope this doesn't sound too weird. I just realized I forgot to mess with my sound card before it's this crazy thing. Every time I start my computer, I have to go into the deep settings and set everything again. I have to reinstall my card, my audio card, every time I turn it on. I have no idea why that would be, but that's why I'm always forgetting to do things before I shouldn't have to do them. But yeah, so this crisis of purpose is coming from a couple of places. And just as you would expect in this world where everything contains its contradiction and all things arise from the interplay of opposites, it is atheism and religion, or better yet, materialism and religion, that are causing the identical fucking problem. And it's either because people think there are no answers or because people think they have the answers. Either way, no good. And so, again, this idea that, people can believe whatever they want as long as they're not hurting anyone. I hate to tell you this, but if you have a fundamentally flawed and fundamental belief, you are hurting people. You're hurting yourself and you're hurting everyone else. A lot of the things that we've come to accept as, fundamental rules in our society are not correct. And it's a difficult job to get in there and restructure things at the very foundation. I mean, the building is already constructed, right? So we got to do foundation work on this gigantic structure without toppling it over. I don't think I have to tell you that the challenge that we're facing is extraordinary. And so, on the one hand, we have this sort of nihilism, basically, that we also call materialism. And so, if you have no God, no afterlife, no reincarnation even to worry about your karma, what is the point? There's absolutely no point to existence. And both on the macro level, where we have, rivers testing positive for cocaine in England, oceans testing positive for benzodiazepines. I know that's off the west coast of the United States, but I mean, you guys know how big the ocean is, right? Granted, things that are coming from off the mainland are going to be a bit more concentrated, a few miles in, but still. Testing positive for benzodiazepines, the oceans. Right? On the macro scale, the crisis of purpose is a big problem. On the micro scale, with the individuals, I see it over and over and over again as a plant medicine facilitator. It is possibly, there are two things, I guess, that are at the root of just about every person's, maybe actually I could actually say 100% of people. It's either unresolved or unacknowledged trauma or crisis of purpose. it took me a long time actually to understand that there are a lot of people who do not have significant trauma, and that all they're suffering from is a crisis of purpose. And so, back to the beginning of our tale, after a fashion, I suppose, the interest, the fascination with the big questions of existence. If you can support your life's journey and the knowledge that we are only here for the experience, with what I think should be a fundamental fascination for every sentient person, you can always evade a sense of purposelessness, depression, anxiety, all of these things that plague people and drive them to take benzodiazepines, SSRIs, alcohol, heroin, cocaine. Be in the mystery. It really is that simple. And, we have tools at our disposal to an extent that we have never had before in human history. We also have more distractions, and we're facing greater peril than we have ever been in human history. And it does not seem like a coincidence to me that, if you take into consideration that fear reduces intelligence, which kills curiosity, right? And then lack also compels people to be more, what would you say, like pragmatic or practical level. They're not thinking deeply. If your first consideration is how you're going to eat, how you're going to pay your bills. So it's, interesting to me, to say the least, that every time there is a cultural, not so much upheaval, but when the culture attempts to re-engineer itself with psychedelics and mystical practices, an interest in spirituality, there are all sorts of crises and wars, because it drives them back into the shallow water. Fear is the great motivator. It's either very, very convenient, or it has been engineered as a response, particularly this time, I think. If you consider the free flow of information, or what was the free flow of information. I mean, censorship is very real now. I actually screenshotted some of the things that I've been sent notices from Facebook and YouTube. It's pretty intense. But relatively free flow of information. The stereotypes, misconceptions, and misinformation about psychedelics have been eroded. There are more of us than ever. And we have the keys. We know what we're doing better than we ever have in the past. And the empire is, in a sense, weaker than it's ever been. In the most important sense, because there are so many people that are coming to an awareness that it's actually not necessary. That my feeling is they have had to engineer all of these circumstances in order to maintain control. That's all that's happening. That's all that's happening. And one of the most valuable lessons that I've learned from, I guess, being an influencer, I hate to use that word, but I mean, I don't know, Amazon sent me an email saying, you want to be an influencer affiliate. So I guess, you know what I mean? Whatever. Social media guy running my mouth, whatever you want to say. And I really learned how far we've fallen. For example, George Carlin, go watch some old George Carlin videos. And then remind yourself that that was a liberal archetype only 30 years ago. And compare that to even the same people that used to cheer George Carlin on. It's pretty disconcerting. Pretty disconcerting. Man, where was I going with that? I just pictured George Carlin's face, and for some reason it derailed my entire train. Oh, okay. Well, the specificity may be lost, but I have the generalities. Oh, yeah, that's it. I was really surprised to find out how unwilling to listen to reason, how deeply and profoundly indoctrinated people have become, and how fearful. And it's really, challenged my commitment to what I consider to be my purpose. Because in a way, I kind of feel like, what's the point? No one is going to listen to anything they don't already think. Nobody wants to know the truth at this point, it seems. People just want to hear their opinions coming out of your mouth. And if that's not what you're doing, then they're just going to unsubscribe, delete you. And then, on top of that, I have the shadow ban and everything. And it's funny because when they really pulled the carpet out from under everyone, they knew that the ones that they really needed to silence would react the fastest and the loudest. And that allowed them to muzzle all of us that didn't already have a sizable following. Difficult if you're already really big. So, point being, when you're faced with that kind of challenge, when you understand that when you challenge someone's religious or political beliefs, no matter how effectively, no matter the concision, no matter the tact, you trigger their fight or flight response, because any cognitive dissonance, any cognitive bias is hardwired into our survival instinct. And so once these things are established, very, very difficult to uproot them. And so I've been thinking, aside from the work that I do with people on an individual basis, the only way that we can convince anyone to bathe in the fountain, to weep like a widow, to witness the glory. That Tool song, Lateralis, is to live in such a way that it inspires emulation. We cannot talk beyond preaching to the choir at this point. The unhappy truth is that nearly all of you that are going to watch this don't really need to, in the sense that you already agree with me and kind of know what I'm talking about. You know what I mean? So we just have to meet the demand, rise up to the level of our halos, with our feet dragging below the hells. And we have to live in a way that's worthy of emulation, that inspires, and that convinces, in a sense. Part of that is an obligation to get better at evaluating the information that we accept, what we put out there in social media. We don't want to make fools of our kind. And that happens all too often. I honestly suspect that, like Flat Earth and a lot of these other crazier sort of fringe things are actually black flag operations. They're actually propaganda. I mentioned George Carlin a little while ago, and I just saw this video of him from like the late 80s or early 90s or something, and it sounded like it was from yesterday, but it couldn't have been because he's been dead for so long. It's amazing, incredible, in all the wrong ways, how little has changed. And I wonder to an extent if it's just gotten more obvious, but he was talking about how the far right wants to control your behavior and the far left wants to control your language. And I was like, what? All the way back then? I thought the left just started acting like that. Pretty incredible. Pretty incredible thing to see. That so little has changed. And so, do we really need to talk about the tools? You know what I mean? Where's the Discord link? What does that say? What is the Discord link? Hold on a second. Let me go get my email. I'll throw it in the chat real quick. You guys know what to do. But I guess in case there are people that have popped on here because they're struggling with this crisis of purpose, the bad news is that, there's really only one way out of that. Oh, I can't type without unplugging my phone. Yeah, because I have to unplug my keyboard and plug my phone in, so I can't. But yeah, there's only one way out of it. Your only purpose, illumignostic, and I would like to welcome you, is to experience the universe. And it's not so bad. I hear people that are struggling with this tell me all the time that, they just want it to be over. If they could find the eject button, they would, and all this stuff. But it's so short, man. I was 20 years old like 10 minutes ago, from my point of view. So, that line of thinking is just an absolute absurdity. Don't worry. It'll be over soon enough. And really, the thing is that we have been supplied with no shortage of mystery, things to be fascinated by, new things to discover. It's always possible if you can just find the motivation to enter into a relationship with the mystery. And from there, it's pretty simple. And if you look at the nature of the tools that we have to address things like addiction and depression and PTSD and anxiety and fear of death and all of these things that plague humanity, like psilocybin, for example, there's a positive correlation between psilocybin and creativity. If you send me an email, I'll send you the Discord, I guess, or come back to this live stream later and I'll post it there. There's a direct correlation between creativity and intelligence, right? And the way that psilocybin and ayahuasca and LSD and all of these other indole-ring psychedelics affect the brain, the structural changes that are made facilitate continued growth along the lines of being a sentient, creative, happy, interesting, engaged being. And let's say after a few weeks of treatment with psilocybin, you have the motivation to exercise. Now your dopamine levels are going up in a healthy way. You have more energy. The psilocybin is building new neural networks at 100 times the rate that it was a week ago. And so you pick up guitar or piano or even just start singing. Now you have a creative outlet. Now you have an opportunity to improvise and create in the moment. Now you're taking chances. Because if you're trying to do something, inevitably you're risking failure. There is success. But that's another element of flow state. Creativity, concentration. If you're inspired and you have more energy, your concentration increases. And so there's this snowballing or domino effect that comes from taking a single step forward. And every act in the right direction consolidates momentum. And when you consolidate momentum, you increase power. And when you're moving along the path of the positive, there are really no obstructions, because there is no negative force. There's only inertia. And that inertia will assist you in your efforts at coming into homeostasis with the larger system of which you are a part. All struggle, all strain is contrary to ease. And it's unnatural. People imagine themselves engaged in a great battle that they cannot win, that is entirely imaginary. Because once you align yourself with the positive, you have all of the forces of nature to assist you. And now we have really come to the crux of the apostrophe. You know, if anyone else has the Discord link, you can throw it in the chat. All my gear is like falling apart, so I can't plug a camera and and the keyboard in at the same time. I was just thinking maybe one of you guys would have it. Oh, yeah. So now we've come to the crux of the apostrophe. This is that critical area that exposes the heart of the matter and creates that vulnerability. That raw exposure confers. The solution to our crisis of purpose is flow state. It is pursuit of gnosis. It is contemplation of the mysteries. It is the study of sciences. I didn't mention earlier that one thing that it is not, people know that spirituality is, in some sense, an antidote to the atom bomb, to the crisis of purpose, to Ennui. But they don't know what it is. And that is another aspect of the popular cultural narrative that I know is at least partially engineered to mislead. Becoming spiritual does not mean that you suddenly become superstitious. It does not mean that you either believe in spirits or you don't. You're a materialist, you're not enlightened, you know what I mean? You're not spiritual if you don't believe that there are parasitical entities floating around trying to suck everyone's life force out of them. Right? That's not what spiritual is. Spiritual is knowledge of self and knowledge of the universe. It is, or you could say enlightenment, illumination. What is that really? Knowledge of what is. That's all it is. That's all there ever can be. And in order to make real progress, even on the spiritual plane, your primary commitment is to truth. And objectivity and critical thinking and rational thought, these are still your guides. And if you doubt me, look around at all these spiritual people that are following these, new agey kind of, or superstitious or whatever kind of narratives. Are their lives getting any better? They might be putting on, social media that they are, but in general, they're not. Because these things just allow for spiritual bypassing. They allow for, you can blame it all on parasitical entities. You can convince yourself that the energy worker cleared away all of the negativity and now you don't have to do anything. Right? I see a lot of that. People say, oh yeah, I was just healed by this shaman and now, I'm acting exactly the same way, have all the same problems, everything's still, my personality is the same, everything's obviously to everyone else exactly as it was before. You know what I mean? So this stuff is, I'm not saying there's no reality to it at all, but I'm just saying you have to be very careful about how you apply it and how you think about it. But spirituality in its legitimate sense is indeed the answer to this crisis of purpose. Fascination with the mystery. Pursuit of knowledge. Pursuit of experience for the sake of experience. And it should be no surprise that there is so much energy put into misdirection. When you really understand how empowering it is to pursue true gnosis. That snowballing domino effect. One of the things it ends in is ungovernable people. Good people do not need laws. Bad people will always break laws. That's it. Anyone that thinks otherwise has been hoodwinked. The prisons are overflowing. You know what I mean? And one of the true miracles of the pursuit of the kind of knowledge and the disposition and ontology that you generally will arrive in after sufficiently pursuing these ideas, there is a genuine transformation that occurs in the overwhelming majority of people. Nothing is certain. And as Terence McKenna said, psychedelics don't work on stupid people. Some narcissists are too far gone. Some psychopaths cannot be saved. Well, you know, I'm not entirely convinced of that even. But for all intents and purposes as things stand, you know. But we are a hair's breadth. Is that a term? You know what I mean. Away from the transformation that could reformat the entire culture. Most of the wedge issues, the things that are driving people apart and causing all of the division and chaos, are engineered. And you know why that's necessary? Because people have more common ground to stand on than ever. This is what we must focus on. We must also focus on hitting the like button and supporting illumignostic in his effort to talk some goddamn sense into at least a handful of people. Seriously, there are methods in the chat that you can... No, I didn't put it, actually. In the description. Let me copy that just in case anyone's feeling inclined. Also, you can join our Patreon where we go deeper than I do on the public YouTube. We've been working through Masonic Degree 28 for a while. We're almost done. Pretty amazing, man, you know. And one of the real values of it is that your only real proof is success. Truth is self-substantiating, right? It doesn't need validation. And the reality is that most people know it when they see it or hear it. And one of the things that Albert Pike really focused on when he wrote Morals and Dogma was showing that at one point in ancient history, mankind had the truth, but lost the truth and found error, and has been stumbling in the darkness of superstition and slavery and despotism ever since. But he did a tremendous job of showing all these parallels that exist throughout all of these mystical systems. And it turns out that when people say that, you know, behind the religions, behind, you know, the philosophies, the same thing is found. They're not talking about the golden rule here. It's something much, much more profound and much deeper than that. The way that the Kabbalah actually reflects the sciences. And speaking of people following narratives that are generated in order to keep them in the dark and keep them miserable and keep them slurping at the titty of big pharma and, eating Xanax until the oceans test positive for benzodiazepines. Those are the same people that have convinced people that the Kabbalah is evil and satanic and that Freemasonry is evil and satanic and that the Illuminati is bad. All of those things are false. 100% false. Those are either the tools themselves or compendiums where you can find the tools to put yourself on the fast track to liberation. That's why they've been demonized. No other reason. It always kills me how much of a failure there is for people to recognize the extent of the bad narratives that are out there. And I say this all the time, but if you believe that there's propaganda in society, if you don't believe that, you're brain dead. You're just literally brain dead. It's just the dumbest thing ever. In fact, U.S. citizens are pretty much the only people that I have consistently ever talked to this about that all don't believe their government creates propaganda. Literally the only ones in the world that think that their government doesn't do that. And it's like they're the most propagandized. Israel, probably, in the United States are the most heavily propagandized. You're worse than China. At least as bad as China. But people are only suspicious of the mainstream narratives. It's the alternative narratives that are aimed at the people they're worried are out of line. So those are the ones that you need to be the most suspicious of. I don't know why this is so hard for people. I guess it's because people want to believe that there's some kind of trustworthy information out there somewhere. But there really isn't. I mean, you have to find it yourself. And that's why, the tools that I talk about on this channel, the systems that I describe, where you are empowered to make a connection with the universal mind for yourself. There is no book that is going to do it for you. There is no savior, there is no guru, there is no teal swan that isn't a psychopathic narcissist. Sadhguru killed his wife. You know what I mean? Like, you can't do that. The only reason to trust illumignostic is that illumignostic doesn't try to tell you what to think. I just encourage people to think. That's why I'm demonetized and shadow banned. But seriously, you have the tools. You have the methods. And the reality is that if you combine lucid dreaming, right? Get good at it. Don't have doubt. Don't pander to doubt. Just do it. I mean, you're doubling your waking hours, basically, and still getting rest. Right? Brilliant. Psychedelics. Taken in the right way, under the right circumstances, with the right people. Or alone. You have to play an instrument. It's best if it's an instrument you can improvise on. Drums are fine. The voice is fine. But in the case of something like piano or the guitar, and this is very important, you have to be ambidextrous. You are using both hemispheres of the mind. You are engaging rhythm, melody, and harmony simultaneously. And then, if you get good enough at it, you're able to improvise within the context of a rigid structure with nearly absolute freedom. And because the mind is holistic, that ability will transfer from the guitar or the piano or whatever it is. I think guitar and piano probably for this purpose are the best. But then when you acquire that, it will manifest in every other area of your life. Even down to the fact that when you try to master an instrument, you're learning not to make mistakes. If you spend hours and hours and hours conditioning yourself not to make mistakes and to find the best choices on the fretboard, guess what's going to happen in the rest of your life? Everyone needs to play instruments. Banjo, bass, whatever. But, just anything where both of your hands are doing something different, and I actually, harmonic and melodic instruments are best. So I'm going to stick with guitar and piano as the best for flow state. Taking chances. And here's the big one, and this is the one that almost no one seems to be able to handle. You have to admit that you don't know and you're never going to know. Life after death, whether or not there's a God, you have to accept that subjective belief is relatively meaningless. Until you have the courage to do that, you are trapped. That's a fact. The belief is the death of intelligence. Drink and dance all night with doubt. Find her a virgin in the morning. Sleep with faith, and there will be a corpse in your arm upon awakening. 11 viewers, 11 likes. Do smash that like button, guys, and also support the channel. It's getting harder and harder for me to do this in a way that, compensates me for my time. It seems like the shadow ban's getting worse, so if you guys appreciate this kind of content, want me to keep making it, join the Patreon, buy me a coffee. I might even do a music stream after this, even though it's almost 10 o'clock. Well, where are we at? We're talking about flow state, taking risks. Yeah, and there you go. This idea of taking risks, and also, as Terence McKenna said, monotony, monogamy, and monotheism are the three enemies of man. I'm not so sure that monogamy is such a terrible thing, but certainly monotony and predictability impede your ability to enter into a meaningful dialogue with the subconscious in the universe. And so the most powerful, liberating choice you can make is to let go of the misconception that you know things that you cannot possibly know. And so, that leaves you also with much more in the way of possibilities. It's predictable. I talk about that. We lose a few people. Like, I know I can believe in Jesus or whatever. You know what I mean? It's just like the worst thing that ever happened to humanity. Religion and abject materialism are the two most destructive forces that we have encountered as a collective, as a species. All right, folks. Well, I think that I've pretty much run the course on this subject. So, again, I'd like to encourage everyone to drink deep from the well of courage. Don't need that neon god, full throttle, liquid Jesus straight from the bottle. You know what I mean? we have to have the courage to confront the universe on the terms that it dictated. Living with illusions is always going to fail you. Chasing phantoms, as is the case when people think that they can solve their problems by getting rid of parasitical entities instead of actually dealing with their issues. And the thing is that I can assure you, if you can manage to do this without propping yourself up on these false idols, your moments of existential dread may be more intense. It's true. But in the long run, you will achieve higher transcendental states. You will create things that are more lasting and of more substance. And when you need real strength, you will be able to derive it from your experiences, from your tribulations, but mostly you will have conditioned yourself to have courage. Because, we talked about how the two main factors that have driven people into the crisis of purpose are materialism and atheism and religion. But these two are one. That's why they have the same effect. And what lies behind them is fear of the unknown. This is really the fundamental force that drives exploitation, that supports dictators, that supports cult leaders, churches, despotism, superstition, you name it. They say the devil that you know is better than the devil that you don't. I'm not so sure about that. You have to seek after true illumination. According to the Zohar, that can only be done by observing the actual universe as a reflection of that which created it. This is why conjecture is forbidden in mystical Judaism. Actual, tangible, testable knowledge. To always remember that you can make inferences about a spiritual plane through these observations, but never just based on faith. Ever. So, all right. Well, I was going to wrap it up, but people keep piling on here. It's good to see all you guys. I hope you show up to my music streams. Last night was kind of sad. We had like 2 people. We used to get like 20 people, and I went out and bought all this stuff to improve my sound, and now no one shows up. I think it's the shadow ban, honestly. But yeah, try to show up to my music streams. I like to have people there. I might even, when I click off of this one, I might set one of those up because I'll be up for a little while. Might as well. It's a very simple game plan. Psychedelics, meditation, good diet, enough exercise, discipline and willpower, patience, creativity. These are your path to true spiritual development. And I think we all know there's nothing you can buy. I mean, don't get me wrong. One of the best things you can do for yourself is to make enough money that you never have to worry about anything ever again. But beyond that, if you're still pursuing money, you're just mentally ill. So I'm not negating the importance of financial stability. But you must balance the pentagram. Money falls under the category of earth. The intellect in those pursuits falls under the category of air. Creativity, sexuality, these are fire. Water is emotion. Must balance the pentagram. If you go to a psychic to find out what your past lives are, spiritual bypassing. You're paying for someone to lie to you. If you go to an energy healer and then you neglect your practices, your meditation, your psychoanalysis, either done by yourself or by someone else, whatever the path is to healing your trauma, spiritual bypassing. It's not real progress. Balance the pentagram. Thank you guys so much for spending this time with me. Please hit the like button, share, subscribe, support us on Patreon where you can access our secret streams and 4 years of talking about Masonic secrets, all drawn from Albert Pike's Morals and Dogma. And probably pop back on in a few minutes to play a few songs for those of you that might be interested. And good night.